Gunman at closing time. On April 22, 2018, James Shaw Jr. arrived at a Waffle House restaurant in Antioch, Tennessee, just after 3 in the morning. He was 29 years old, a wire technician for AT&T, a father, and a Nashville native. He had spent the evening at a club with friends, and the Waffle House was a late-night stop on the way home. Nothing about that night suggested it would be different from any other. Shaw and his group walked into the restaurant and took seats at the counter. As they settled in, Shaw glanced back toward the parking lot and noticed a man sitting alone in a tan Chevrolet truck. He could not explain what bothered him about it. The energy, he later said, was not right, but there was nothing specific to act on. He turned back to the counter. A few minutes later, at approximately 3:23 in the morning, Travis Ranking climbed out of that truck. He was 29 years old and wearing nothing but a green waist-length jacket. He was carrying an AR-15 style rifle. He had been sitting in the parking lot for approximately 4 minutes. Ranking raised the rifle and opened fire before he reached the door. 2 people standing outside were shot and killed. He then walked inside the restaurant and continued firing. The interior of the Waffle House filled with breaking glass and screaming. Customers dove for the floor or ran for any cover they could reach. 2 more people were shot inside. One of them, 23-year-old Aquila da Silva, would die later at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The total killed was 4. 4 others were injured. Shaw was near the restroom area at the back of the restaurant when the shooting began. He moved behind a swivel door between the dining area and the kitchen corridor. It was not a locked door. It was not reinforced. It was a barrier made of hinges and circumstance. Ranking shot through it. The bullet grazed Shaw's arm. He looked at the door. He understood that it would not protect him. There was nowhere to run, and the bathroom behind him felt, as he later described it, like shooting fish in a barrel. He pressed himself against the door and watched through any gap he could find, tracking Ranking's movements through the restaurant. Then Ranking stopped. The rifle went quiet. Ranking looked down at the weapon, either to reload or to clear malfunction. Shaw did not know which. He did not wait to find out. He ran through the door. Shaw had no combat training, no military background, no law enforcement experience. He was a 29-year-old man in a Waffle House at 3 in the morning, and he ran directly at a man holding an AR-15. He collided with Ranking, driving into him. He got both hands on the rifle's barrel and pulled. The barrel was hot from firing. The heat burned directly into his palms and fingers, leaving second-degree burns across both hands. He held on. Ranking had one hand on the weapon. Shaw pulled. He pulled the rifle up, then sideways, then over the bar counter, throwing it behind the counter and out of reach. He then drove Ranking physically backward, through the restaurant and out through the front door. Ranking left the building without his rifle. He walked away on foot, still in nothing but his jacket. He had 2 additional 30-round magazines in that jacket, which were recovered later. Shaw did not follow him. He was afraid Ranking might have another weapon. He went out to the parking lot and flagged down passing drivers, asking them to call 911. He then changed his clothes and went to church with his family. Ranking was arrested 34 hours later, found in a wooded area near his Nashville apartment after a citywide manhunt. He had been considered a person of interest by federal authorities prior to the attack for unrelated reasons. Shaw was treated at a hospital for the burns on both hands and the graze wound on his arm. He was released the same day. When asked about what he had done, he declined the word hero. He said he had acted to save himself. He said he believed anyone could have done what he did. Ranking was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and multiple additional counts. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The 2 30-round magazines he had been carrying when Shaw forced him out the door were never used. Dance hall, second stop. On the evening of January 21st, 2023, the Lai Ballroom and Studio on South Garfield Avenue in Alhambra, California, was hosting a social dance party for Lunar New Year. The ballroom had been a fixture in the local community for 30 years, founded by the grandmother of a young man named Brandon Say. Say, 26 years old, was working the front desk that night. He was a computer programmer by trade, but he spent several evenings a week at the ballroom, greeting guests and managing the door. He described himself as the face of the club when people walked in. By 10:30 that night, most of the guests had gone. The Lunar New Year festival on the street outside had wound down. The ballroom was quieting. Tsai was at the front desk. He heard the front door creak. Then he heard the metallic sound of components moving against each other, a mechanical clinking as if metal parts were being handled or adjusted. He turned around. A man he had never seen before was standing in the lobby, holding a gun. The man was 72 years old, and his name was Hukan Tran. What Say did not know in that moment was that Tran had left another dance studio. The Star Ballroom Dance Studio in nearby Monterey Park approximately 17 minutes earlier. At that studio, 2 miles to the south, Tran had killed 11 people and wounded 9 others at a Lunar New Year celebration. He had then driven north and walked into the Lai. Tran stood in the lobby. His expression, Tse later said, was very still. He looked around the room as though he was locating people. Tse saw him begin to handle the weapon, appearing to ready it. Tse froze. He would later describe the moment plainly. He believed he was going to die. He believed his life was ending in the lobby of his grandmother's ballroom. And then, in that same moment, he saw that Tran's attention was on the weapon, not on him. Tran was looking down. Tse moved. Slowly at first, 2 or 3 steps, angling out of Tran's direct line of sight. Then he stopped. He had a clear line to the gun. He lunged. He grabbed the weapon with both hands and held on. The gun Tran was carrying was a Cobra M11, a 9mm semi-automatic weapon designed to accept 30-round magazines. The Los Angeles County Sheriff later confirmed it was an assault weapon. Tse held the barrel end with both hands and did not let go. Tran fought back. He struck Tse across the face. He hit him in the back of the head. He landed blows on Tse's back and hands. The 2 men grappled in the lobby for approximately 40 seconds. Tse used his elbows to work the weapon sideways, separating Tran's grip joint by joint. Tran got one hand free to swing again. In that moment, Tse pulled the gun fully away from him and shoved him back. Tse pointed the weapon at Tran and told him to leave. Tran stood there. He looked at the gun. He looked at Tse. He appeared, Tse later said, to be calculating whether to come forward again and fight for it. Tse told him he would shoot. Tran turned and jogged out the door. He got into his van and drove away. Tse called the police. He was still holding the gun when the call connected. His face was bruised across the nose. The back of his head was bruised. His hands were bruised. He was shaking, he later said, for the rest of the night. The weapon Tran had carried was traced by its serial number. That trace gave investigators Tran's name and a physical description. It was that information, in part, that directed the manhunt. The following morning, police located Tran's van in a parking lot in Torrance, approximately 30 miles from Monterey Park. As officers approached, they heard a single gunshot from inside the vehicle. Tran was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Los Angeles County Sheriff called Tse's actions heroic and said they had saved countless lives. California Governor Gavin Newsom visited him in person to thank him. President Biden invited him to attend the State of the Union address as a guest of honor. The city of Alhambra awarded him a Medal of Courage. Tse emerged from the struggle with bruises on his face and neck. He did not fire the weapon he had taken. He called the police instead, and he waited. Birthday night, combat mode. On the night of November 19th, 2022, Richard Fierro was at Club Q in Colorado Springs with his wife, his daughter's boyfriend, and several friends. They were there to celebrate a birthday and watch a drag show. Fierro was 45 years old. He had served 15 years in the United States Army as a field artillery officer, completed 4 combat deployments between Iraq and Afghanistan, and retired at the rank of major. He had earned 2 Bronze Stars. He owned a brewery in Colorado Springs with his wife. He was, by his own repeated description, just some dude. The show was underway. The group was on the dance floor. Fierro later described the night as one of the most enjoyable the family had shared in some time. Just before midnight, gunshots rang out inside the club. Fierro registered the sound immediately. He recognized cordite. He saw muzzle flashes. His body, he said, went directly into what he called combat mode. He dove and pulled a friend to the ground. He looked across the room. A 22-year-old man named Anderson Lee Aldrich had entered Club Q armed with an AR-15 style rifle, a pistol, a flak vest, and additional ammunition magazines. He had opened fire on the crowd. 5 people were killed. At least 17 others were wounded. Among the patrons fleeing toward a patio exit at the back of the club was a crowd of people who did not yet know the door was there or whether it led anywhere safe. Fierro saw Aldrich moving toward that direction. He ran across the room. Aldrich was wearing body armor with a carrying handle on the back, a loop of material used for lifting or dragging gear. Fierro grabbed that handle from behind, pulled hard, and brought Aldrich to the floor. He jumped on top of him. The AR-15 came free and was pushed out of reach. Fierro located Aldrich's pistol and took it. He began striking Aldrich with the pistol. He found what he later described as a crease between the armor and Aldrich's head and hit him there repeatedly with the weapon. A patron later identified as Thomas James helped pin Aldrich down and kicked him in the head. A drag performer who was nearby used her high heels to strike Aldrich's face at Fierro's direction. Aldrich was on the floor and not moving when police arrived minutes later. Officers entering the club saw Fierro holding a firearm. They handcuffed him and placed him in a patrol car, where he sat for more than an hour while the scene was assessed. He described this as fully understandable. The injuries Fierro sustained during the struggle were confirmed by his wife Jessica: bruising on his right side, damage to his hands, knees, and ankle. He had fought in a nightclub in Colorado while wearing civilian clothes, with no weapon of his own, against a man in body armor carrying multiple firearms. His daughter's boyfriend, 22-year-old Raymond Green Vance, was among the 5 people killed that night. Vance had been dancing on the floor with the group minutes before the shooting began. Fierro was released after police sorted the scene. He went back into the club to help his injured friends. He guided people to safety. He helped apply a tourniquet to one friend with police assistance. Aldrich faced preliminary charges of 5 counts of first-degree murder and 5 counts of a bias-motivated crime. Colorado Springs Mayor John Suthers met with Fierro afterward and said he had never encountered anyone who had done something so heroic while remaining so humble about it. President Biden called him personally. Fierro did not call himself a hero at any point. He said he was protecting his family, and that at that moment everyone in that room was his family. He said he felt no joy. He said 5 people were not going home. Classroom, no warning. The morning of May 25th, 2018, 7th grade science teacher Jason Seaman was in his classroom at Noblesville West Middle School in Noblesville, Indiana. Noblesville sits approximately 25 miles northeast of Indianapolis. The school runs grades 6 through 8 and had approximately 1,300 students enrolled. It was a Friday, 1 week before the end of the academic year. The class was taking a science test. Seaman was 29 years old. He had played 4 years of college football as a defensive lineman at Southern Illinois University, lettering in each year from 2007 through 2010. He was now a middle school science teacher and football coach. He had been with the Noblesville School District for nearly 4 years. A 13-year-old male student asked to be excused from the classroom during the test. The request was ordinary. Students were excused and returned regularly. Seaman allowed it. The student left. Then the door opened again. The student came back into the classroom carrying 2 handguns. He opened fire. Students in the room scrambled. Some dropped to the floor. Some ran for the back of the room and pressed behind desks. Seaman saw what was happening. According to students who were present, he threw a basketball at the shooter before he moved, and then he ran directly at him. He crossed the classroom at full speed and tackled the student to the ground, taking him down before additional shots could be fired. During the confrontation, Seaman was shot 3 times. 1 bullet passed through his abdomen, 1 entered his hip, 1 struck his forearm. He was shot while moving toward the threat or in the immediate moments of contact, and he did not stop. The shooter was on the ground. Seaman held him there. He was also, according to student accounts, shouting to the class. He told them to call 911. He told them to get out of the building as fast as they could. Students began evacuating. They were subsequently bused to the Noblesville High School gymnasium, where hundreds of parents arrived to collect them. A 13-year-old student, Ella Whistler, had also been shot. She was transported to Riley Hospital for Children at Indiana University Health in critical but stable condition. The shooter was arrested at the scene. He had not been injured during the confrontation with Seaman. Seaman was transported to Indiana University Health Methodist Hospital. He underwent surgery. His mother confirmed the wounds publicly: abdomen, hip, and forearm. He was in good condition following surgery and was released from the hospital the following day, Saturday, May 26th. He made his first public statement on Monday. He said his actions on that day, in his mind, were the only acceptable actions he could have done given the circumstances. He thanked the Noblesville community for its support. He praised Ella Whistler and asked everyone to keep her in their thoughts as she recovered. He did not use the word hero about himself at any point. The 13-year-old shooter could not be charged as an adult under Indiana law as it stood at that time. Investigations and search warrants continued. The school district did not publicly name the student. Ella Whistler recovered. Seaman returned to the same classroom the following school year. He was still teaching there years later, in the same room, doing what he described as what he loves: sleeping toward Paris. On August 21st, 2015, 3 American friends were traveling by train from Amsterdam to Paris. Spencer Stone was 23 years old, an airman first class in the United States Air Force assigned to the 65th Medical Operations Squadron at Lodges Field in the Azores. He was on vacation in Europe. Beside him were his childhood friends: Alex Skarlados, 22, a specialist in the Oregon Army National Guard recently returned from deployment in Afghanistan, and Anthony Sadler, 23, a college senior at California State University, Sacramento. They were backpacking through Europe. None of them had been in frontline combat. Stone was asleep on the Thali high-speed train, train number 9364. The train was carrying 554 passengers through Belgium toward France. He was woken by a gunshot and the sound of shattering glass. Stone turned. In the aisle of train car 12, a 25-year-old Moroccan man named Ayoub El-Kazani had emerged from the direction of the bathroom. He was carrying an AKM assault rifle and a handgun. He was also carrying a box cutter and approximately 200 270 rounds of ammunition. Spanish authorities had flagged him in February of 2014 for connections to radical Islam. A French-American passenger named Marc Mugallian had seen El-Kazani first and had attempted to take the rifle. He had managed to get a hand on it before El-Kazani overwhelmed him and threw him aside. El-Kazani then shot Mugallian. The bullet passed through Mugallian's back, chest, and neck. El-Kazani was now in the aisle with the rifle, attempting to cock it. Scarlatos turned to Stone. He said, "Let's go, go." Stone got up. He ran the length of the car and hit El-Kazani before the weapon could fire again. He wrapped his arms around the attacker and drove him backward, bringing him to the floor and holding him in a chokehold. El-Kazani could not bring the rifle to bear. He reached for the box cutter instead. He slashed Stone across the neck. He slashed him near the eyebrow. He drew the blade across Stone's hand and nearly severed his thumb, cutting through the tissue to the point where it required surgical reattachment. Stone did not let go. Scarlatos moved in and took the AK-47 from the floor. He struck El-Kazani repeatedly in the head with the muzzle of the rifle. Sadler and a 62-year-old British passenger named Chris Norman ran forward and helped force El-Kazani down. The four of them bound him using a necktie from another passenger. He was secured on the floor of the train car. Stone was bleeding heavily from his neck and his hand. He turned away from El-Kazani and walked forward in the train car to where Mugallian was lying, shot through the back and chest and neck. Stone put his fingers directly into Mugallian's wound to slow the bleeding. He held that position until French emergency medical technicians met the train at the next station. Mugallian's wife later said Stone saved her husband's life. Stone was transported for medical treatment. His thumb was surgically reattached. He received stitches across his neck, eyebrow, and arm. He was treated at a United States Air Force facility in Germany before returning to the United States on September 3, 2015. El-Kazani was arrested at the train's next stop. He was subsequently tried in France. He received a life sentence. 3 accomplices who had helped him travel from Syria to France and supplied him with weapons received sentences ranging from 7 to 27 years. 3 days after the attack, French President François Hollande presented Stone, Scarlatos, Sadler, and Norman with the Legion of Honor, France's highest recognition. Stone was later promoted to Staff Sergeant and received the Airman's Medal and a Purple Heart. 554 people had been on that train. El-Kazani had 270 rounds and a loaded handgun. Stone had been asleep. First night of Hanukkah. On December 14th, 2025, approximately 1,000 people gathered at Archer Park, a public green space adjacent to Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, for a celebration called Hanukkah by the Sea. The event was organized by the local Chabad group and marked the first night of Hanukkah. There was face painting. There was a petting zoo. Families had been arriving for nearly 2 hours as the summer evening settled over one of Australia's most recognized stretches of coastline. At 6:42 in the evening, 2 men emerged from a silver hatchback with long-barreled weapons and moved toward an elevated pedestrian footbridge that overlooked the park. The younger man, 24-year-old Naveed Akram, reached the bridge and began firing down into the crowd. His father, 50-year-old Sajid Akram, moved off the bridge and descended into the park itself, continuing to fire at close range into the crowd of families below. The attack lasted approximately 8 to 10 minutes. 15 people were killed. Among them was a 10-year-old girl. More than 40 others were hospitalized. 6 firearms were recovered from the scene. 2 improvised explosive devices and a homemade flag associated with Islamic State were found in the gunman's vehicle. Australian authorities declared it an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. Australian authorities would later confirm that 4 civilians attempted to physically confront the gunman during the attack. 3 of those civilians were killed. 1 survived with gunshot wounds. The first to act was a man named Boris Gunman. Gunman, a Jewish man who had been attending the celebration, confronted Sajid Akram during the early moments of the attack. He tackled the older gunman and temporarily disarmed him. Footage confirmed this occurred, but Sajid Akram regained position. Rearmed from the weapons available to the pair, moved back toward the bridge and continued firing into the crowd below. Ahmed Al-Ahmed was 43 years old. He owned a fruit shop in another part of Sydney. He was a Syrian-born Australian citizen who had received his citizenship 5 years earlier. His parents were refugees from the village of Al-Nayrab, near Idlib in Syria. He was a father of 2 daughters. He had served in the police in Syria before emigrating, according to his family. He was near the park when the shooting began. He moved behind parked cars along the beachfront and crouched there, watching. Sajid Akram was firing on the crowd at close range. Al-Ahmed could hear screaming. He could hear children. He came out from behind the cars. He launched himself at Sajid Akram from behind, grabbing him around the neck. The 2 men grappled. Al-Ahmed held on to the shotgun. He got his hands around it and pulled. The weapon came free. Akram fell or was forced to the ground. Al-Ahmed pointed the weapon at him and directed him away. Akram retreated toward the bridge. He was shot dead by police at the scene. Naveed Akram, still firing from the bridge, turned the weapon toward Al-Ahmed. Al-Ahmed was shot twice, once in the arm, once in the hand. He was transported to St. George's Hospital in Sydney and underwent surgery. New South Wales Premier Chris Minns visited Al-Ahmed in his hospital bed that same evening. He described Al-Ahmed's actions as the most unbelievable scene he had ever witnessed. He said there was no doubt that more lives would have been lost without what Al-Ahmed had done. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese also visited Al-Ahmed at the hospital and called him a true Australian hero. A fundraising campaign for Al-Ahmed raised 2.5 million Australian dollars. Among the donors was Jewish-American billionaire Bill Ackman, who gave 99,999 Australian dollars. Sajid Akram was shot dead by police at the scene of the attack. His son, Naveed Akram, survived, was treated for his wounds, and is on remand at Goulburn Correctional Center awaiting trial on 15 counts of murder and 44 additional charges. Al-Ahmed was asked after he was released from hospital whether he had considered shooting Sajid Akram once he held the weapon. He said it did not occur to him. He said he did not want to put his hands in blood. He said he was not thinking about himself when he ran toward the gunman. He said he was thinking about the people screaming. Wrestler, West Hollywood. Just before 1 in the afternoon on October 22, 2025, a man and his girlfriend were walking along the 900 block of North Sweetser Avenue in West Hollywood, California. It was an ordinary Wednesday. The area falls under the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. A dark-colored sedan came down the street at speed. It stopped abruptly near the couple. A masked man stepped out of the passenger side. He was holding a loaded handgun. He walked toward the couple and demanded the man's Rolex watch. Patrick McCloskey was working from his home nearby. He heard a woman screaming from the sidewalk and went to his door. By the time he looked out, the situation had already changed. The man being robbed was a retired professional wrestler. He did not identify himself publicly and declined to give his name to responding deputies. What he did tell them was straightforward. He had taken the gunman's wrist, forced it downward, brought the suspect to the ground, and taken the gun. His girlfriend threw the gun over a nearby fence. The retired wrestler held the suspect pinned to the pavement and did not release him. During the struggle, the suspect's arm was dislocated. The victim held him down anyway and kept holding him until Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrived and made the arrest. McCloskey, who spoke to KTLA News, said the victim had showed no mercy as the robber struggled beneath him. He confirmed that the gun had been loaded. The victim himself told a deputy that a round was visible in the chamber at the time he took it. A second man had been in the sedan. He exited the vehicle briefly when the robbery went wrong, then got back in and drove away before deputies arrived. He was not apprehended. Deputies recovered the firearm from the other side of the fence where the girlfriend had thrown it. The suspect was arrested. The victim declined to be identified. He did not require medical treatment. The suspect had targeted a man on a public sidewalk in the middle of the afternoon and had not known what that man did for a living. The gun was loaded. He found out the hard way. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.